Hi everybody, nice to see you here tonight. A nice full room, fantastic, thanks for coming. I want to thank the library, Santa Cruz Public Library's Capitola branch, for partnering with us to help make this event possible in such a lovely space. So tonight the topic is housing solutions. Housing Matters has partnered with Better Santa Cruz for this event. I'm going to start though by introducing our panel quickly. They'll be telling more about themselves in the agenda you'll see as we go along. John Swift is here from Swift Consulting Services. Ray Bramson, COO of Destination Home. Dr. Robert Ratner, Director of Housing for Health Partnership. And Elaine, Executive Director of Housing Santa Cruz County. Thanks for being here. And also tonight we have a couple of Housing Matters staff. Marlena DeCastro is our Community Education Specialist and she'll be facilitating this conversation. So we'll do a facilitated conversation and then we'll open it up for questions. And then Marcia Greenspan is in the back. She is our Volunteer Program Manager. She can answer all your questions about volunteering at Housing Matters. And also Bev, our volunteer extraordinaire, is at the desk there. She can answer some questions for you as well if anything comes up. A little bit about Housing Matters. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We cover all of Santa Cruz County. We have 3 emergency shelters at our main campus, which is at the corner of Route 1 and Route 9. We also offer supportive services around Santa Cruz County as well, all around the county. We also just, in this last year, opened our first permanent supportive housing project, so 7 units of permanent supportive housing, building Casa Azul. And that's right next door to our campus at 801 River Street. And we are breaking ground very soon on 120 units of permanent supportive housing on our campus. And that's happening any day now. We're getting ready for that to happen. So we serve about 3,000 people annually through all of our programs. Last year we helped house 427 individuals. This particular program is part of our education outreach. So one of our goals is to educate the community around solutions to homelessness. And so we started Neighbors for Neighbors a little over a year ago, and it's kind of been an evolution. Some people who have been here from the beginning, it was just one speaker. At the very beginning, it was just Marcia and I speaking, and it's evolved into having these incredible expert panelists here to help guide us through the information. So I'm going to pass to Kaylin to give an introduction to Better Santa Cruz and what their group is all about.
Great. So we're a small local group. Myself and Marvin co-founded Better Santa Cruz. We're just focused on education surrounding current problems that face Santa Cruz, and right now we're focused on housing. So we're so excited to be here and to again partner with Housing Matters. So first off, we're here about housing solutions. So let's kind of set the stage as to what we're facing here, and if it is affordable to live here in Santa Cruz, and if not, what are the potential solutions? That's what we're here to discuss. So according to a recent San Francisco Chronicle article, we are the most expensive city for rental affordability in California. So for rentals here, the 2-bedroom average rental price is about $3,300 per month. For those looking to buy, last month our median sale price was just over 1.2, and that would cost approximately $7,400 per month, and that's not to mention the down payment of over about $200,000. So keep in mind, given that, the median household income here is only $104,000. For an individual, that drops to just about $41,000. I think based on that, I think we can agree that it seems market rate is beyond the reach of the working class, since one has to earn $63 an hour in order to afford a 2-bedroom rental when the average renter's wage is $22 an hour. When we look at these numbers, it just doesn't seem to work. So, what solutions are we missing? Should we consider communal housing options? Maybe repurposed commercial spaces? What would that process look like? Should we look more to subsidies? Should we increase supply? Are there other solutions? We want to make sure that we recognize housing affordability affects all of us. I think I heard someone earlier ask, why does this matter to me? For anyone, the cost of living is high, and many folks live very tight. So a medical issue or a life event could mean losing your housing or going into debt. We have a large population of people experiencing homelessness, and according to statistics, many of those who are unhoused are actually working. They just cannot afford housing. The majority also don't have access to safe shelter. If you take a look at the PIC count statistics there, you can see the discrepancy. The majority also don't have access to safe shelter, just to drive that point home. Our current options, are they failing? Is this a failing system, a failing cycle? Does the current affordability show a path to home ownership from renting given the math? What housing solutions exist to fix our current problems? What's working, what's lacking, and what can we do from here? So from that, I will leave it to Marlena, and thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for setting the stage with those crucial questions, and I'm really excited to hear the answers from our wonderful expert panelists. So before we kick off our conversation, I would like to go over our community agreements. If you've been here recently, you're familiar with these. These just help us to ensure that this is a safe space for us all to learn from one another. So here they are. I'm gonna read them out, and then I'm gonna ask for a raise of hands to see if you're willing to embrace these agreements for our time together tonight. So the first one is, please take care of yourself in whatever way feels best throughout this meeting. So as Mary said in the beginning, restrooms are right outside. Feel free to get up, stretch, drink some water, do whatever you need to do to be here with us tonight. We appreciate you being here. In this space, we use inclusive language that affirms diversity and celebrates the dignity of all people, including people of color, people of all gender and sexual identities, people of varying abilities, and people of all ages. In this space, we urge everyone to both take space and make space, so listen respectfully and assume positive intent whenever possible. There are no bad questions here, so feel free, ask them. And finally, take the learnings, leave the stories. Sometimes someone will share something about their own life, a personal story about a friend or a family. We ask that those stories stay here, but please do share what you learned tonight with your friends and communities. So how do those agreements sound to everyone? Can I get a raise of hands? Awesome, looks like we're all on board. And then we can go ahead and kick off our panel discussion. So, thank you all for being here. To start us off, can you please share your name, your pronouns, and your role within your group or organization? And we'll start with you, Elaine.
Elaine Johnson, Executive Director, Housing Santa Cruz.
Thanks so much. And sorry, before you go down the line, when you hear housing solutions, what comes to mind? Just right off the top of your head.
We gotta build more.
Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Robert Ratner. I go by he, him, his. I'm the director of the Housing for Health Division in the County of Santa Cruz Human Services Department. And when I hear the word housing solutions, I think of connection, love, home, and we need more of it.
Hi everyone, Ray Bramson, I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Destination Home. We're a public-private partnership in Santa Clara County that's focused on preventing and ending homelessness. I guess I hear housing solutions and I don't really know what that means anymore. I mean, we have half of our country can't afford to pay rent right now. Harvard study in February. We've got people, you know, the lowest income earners are severely rent burdened, meaning they're paying more than 50% of their income towards rent every month. So we got a lot of people struggling in this country right now. And I think we know what to do, and we have a scale problem. So build more of it, right on. We just need to figure out how to do it faster.
So
John Swift, I'm with Swift Consulting Services, and I'm a small developer. I develop like small residential projects, but I consult for bigger projects, both commercial, industrial, hospitals. Costco is a project of mine. Toys R Us Circus City, which is now REI, and can't remember, oh, Best Buy, I guess, is there one of those over there. In any case, I've done a lot of wide variety of development, and in terms of increasing the supply of housing is definitely the highest priority. But I would say, and again, that last word, priority, is the key. We have to make it a priority. For decades and decades, the priority in this town was environmentalism. And I'm not an anti-environmentalism, but there needs to be a balance. And I think that, my theory of politics is it's a pendulum, it swings, right? And it had swung so far during the 70s with the Subdivision Map Act, CEQA being instituted, that it really swung widely that way to the point where housing was a scourge. And we're still feeling the results of that. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Well, let's just dive in. I'll start with you, Dr. Ratner. Can you speak to the challenges that Santa Cruz is facing around housing? What are the current barriers that community members face around housing access and housing affordability?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
there you go.
I know.
There was
Kind of the question.
Yeah, well, I think Ken did a great job of summarizing some of the statistics. I think what it means on the ground at a human level is that I hear on a daily basis how many people are struggling to be able to afford to live here. So we have seniors who've lived in the community for many years, who are renting, can't afford a place. There's a building in the city of Santa Cruz that the affordability period agreement on that project's ending, and there's 70 seniors living in there that have nowhere to go. There are families with children that can't afford to live here and keep people in school, that are often couch surfing from one person's house to another. We have one of the highest rates of people experiencing homelessness per capita in the state, in part because it's so expensive to live here. And the limited resources we have in the affordable housing space, there are, I wish I remembered the exact statistics, but like a 50-unit building will have 10,000 people apply for 50 units because there's such a huge need. So echoing what I think people have said already is we just don't have enough options that are affordable for folks. I think the other thing that I've observed in a lot of conversations is it's an either-or kind of dynamic in community conversations. Either we're helping people who are unhoused or we're helping the teachers and firefighters. And I think some of that is a relic of how government policy has evolved, so that you either have affordable housing or you have market rate housing. But what if we combine them? Right? Can the market rate housing help subsidize some more affordable units? I think a lot of the structures we've created over decades really make that difficult. We have developers who specialize in affordable housing, and I've had conversations with them about, well, what if you had some market rate units? Oh, we can't do that. And I talk to market rate developers who, like, oh, what if you have some supportive housing units in your market rate? Oh, no, we can't do that. We don't know how to do that. And I think one of the consequences of that is the way the development often looks, not just here but in other communities, is very segregated. Like there's legacies of segregation that are really deeply embedded in our country's laws and practices, and they manifest themselves in different ways. One example is when we're trying to create housing for people who are struggling with homelessness, there's such an urgency to address the issue. We want to build fast, and so we create a project that's for lots of people experiencing homelessness in one building, as opposed to 5 units here, 5 units there. So there's some tension around integration in the community and addressing housing needs that are difficult to balance and juggle. And then I'm a healthcare person, so I trained in medicine and public health and got really interested in housing because I saw on a regular basis, if you didn't have a stable place to live, how tremendously impactful that is on people's well-being. And we heard earlier this month from Margaret Kuchel, who's a physician from UCSF, about how unstable housing reduces life expectancy by 25 years on average for folks who are homeless for a year or longer. And it's not just the people without housing, it impacts people with housing as well. Like the health issues that folks on the streets are having can impact our well-being as well. Seeing people suffering, some of the health challenges that folks experience impacts all of us. So really appreciate John's point about the pendulum swinging, and I hope we're swinging in the direction of housing. Appropriate development can help address environmental issues as well. If we develop in the right way in the right place, people are driving less. I don't know how many of you are commuting on Highway 1. There's a lot of environmental damage caused because we don't have places for people to live near where they work and they go to school and where they play. So we need to develop more where folks are living.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, Don?
I'd like to comment just on that, because you made the comment about market rate housing developers not including affordable or vice versa. The reality is that in today's world, the county of Santa Cruz requires 15% of their market rate housing projects to be affordable. So if you come in with 20 units, 15% of those have to be affordable units, and generally moderate. But the state's come down in recent years with density bonus, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this. If you haven't, it's a very, I think, useful and productive tool that's making a significant impact. And you're seeing a lot of projects, particularly in the city, whether you think that's too dense or not, it's having a very significant impact on the production of affordable housing. And we can go into details, I won't at this point, but there's pros and cons to it, and we can go into that as well, that make it difficult, but it is happening by, you have to, there's no choice. The city of Santa Cruz is 20%, downtown is 10%, the county is 15, I think Capitola is 15, correct? Yeah. So in the density bonus, if you do 5%, let's say very low, you can produce more market rate housing. If you do some percentage that's low income, because there's very low, I don't know how much everybody knows about things or not, but anyway, the density bonus you get, the increase in market rate units, is a factor of both the level of affordability and the number of affordable units you put into the project. And so basically, I'll stop real quickly here, but the problem with market rate housing developers had was that this is a burden. How many of you are in an industry like Apple Computer or Google? Does 15% of your product have to be affordable? I don't think so. If you're a car salesman, does 15% of your cars that you produce have to be sold at less than the cost to produce it? That's what we have to do. Okay, so that was a huge burden, and it was really distorting the market. Now they've come in and said, well, we realize that, and so we're going to let you produce more market rate housing if you produce it, which is reasonable. To me, those are the kind of decisions we need to move towards, where market rate housing can facilitate, as you're saying, some disbursement of affordable housing throughout our community, and not that it's bad, but not just 100% affordable housing.
Thank you so much, John. So what would a healthy housing stock look like? What would an affordable option look like in a perfect world? You spoke a little bit, Dr. Ratner, to the lack of segregation, to integration in our communities. I wonder, in your own visions, what does that healthy housing stock look like?
Well, again, it comes back to, instead of creating housing for those people and not for those people, and just creating housing for everyone who lives in this community, is where it all begins. Because if you go back, as John was taking us back, a lot of the zoning laws in this county was designed so certain people can live in certain areas. And it's now that, that they're not just being looked at, but the zoning laws are being changed so that can shift, so that they can build affordable homes for people who may not look the same as other people, right? But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, I'm like Robert, everybody deserves to call a place a home. Seriously, and not just a place where you're gonna lay your head on a pillow and you live in 15 to a 2-bedroom. That's not a home. And it's so critical that we come from that place, whether it's a developer or whether it's gentleman, what the work Robert's doing, myself, Housing Matters, that we have to always keep that in mind when we're at the tables, making these decisions, making these agreements and negotiating, that everyone should be included in who's gonna be housed. Because one of the things, moving here from New York 20 years ago, I remember, I was like, I got here 2 months later, and things didn't pan out the way I thought they were going to, let's just say that. And I watched my 401k just dwindle, and all of it was on rent.
Yep.
And people say, oh, but New York is more expensive. No, it wasn't. I just thought it wasn't. And there, for the grace of God, I came to a point where I was almost unhoused. College educated, just came from a 2-bedroom house in New York to almost being unhoused, right? And had to ask for help. And I bring that up to say, because in these decisions, people have to understand that even though people have jobs and working 2 or 3 jobs, anybody is that one paycheck next to not being unhappy, not being housed. And I've had friends who worked for the county for 25 years almost be homeless because she couldn't afford to pay her rent, right? And so, it comes down to, when you say, what does it look like? It looks like everybody, even people who have a home, stepping it up. Because I tell people it can't just be the people who are experiencing these hardships to try to convince, decision makers that they need a place to live. Everybody deserves to have a place to live. I mean, if you start off from that premise, we may be able to move the needle some. But what I can say, my experience in the 20 years of living here and doing this work that I do, we have to look at things head on and rise above it, make decisions not based in fear, and really want your neighbors to have a place to call home as well. And that's gonna take work. But that takes us, as Congressman Panetta said, it takes all of us. Of course.
You mentioned what does a healthy housing stock look like, and my personal belief is that the housing market, the market itself, does not take care of everybody equally.
That's right.
We have regional housing needs assessment, these RENA goals, communities, and if you look up and down the state, all across California, market rate housing, that's the one place where our communities are hitting their RENA goals. That's where they're actually producing headloads. If you look across the way, all the way down at extremely low income, which is 30% or less of the area median income, these are the poorest people in our community. These are seniors, these are working families at minimum wage, these are disabled adults. The market does not produce any units for them whatsoever, unless there is a driver, and unless there's an incentive within government, and it has to come in the form of local government subsidy. So I don't think our housing market gets healthy by just letting it function on its own and develop on its own. I think you'll get some affordable, sure, but it's typically going to be at a higher income level, and you're not going to be taking care of the folks that are most likely to end up on the streets. So it's not solving this bigger problem. So I think we do need to have integrated communities. I think we failed miserably as a nation at government housing, public housing projects, because we built them as cheaply as possible, and we stuffed too many people inside. But I think you can build high quality, affordable housing at deeper income levels and see really people and individuals and families thrive, but it won't happen on its own. So I think a healthy housing stock has to have government involvement in it to get there.
And I would like to just say, and the system that designed this is what needs to shift.
Absolutely.
Right, because at the end of the day, it's about building communities, right? That's what it's about at the end of the day.
And building homes, like you said, not units, but
Yeah,
real
they're
homes.
That's right, I
People
call
to
homes.
thrive. I love that.
Yes, I call them homes.
So if I might, I'm doing a 389 unit project in the city of Santa Cruz right now. We're doing 54 affordable units. Okay, they'll be interspersed amongst the 389 units. 30 of them are very low income, or 34 I think is very low. There's 19 low and then some percentage of, no moderates, so it's very low and low. That's all that we're doing. So that's not gonna solve the problem, but the other thing we have to think about is, I've been in a lot of meetings over the years, public meetings, and people will fight to the mat over one tree. Over my dead body, you're gonna add another house and move that tree. Will they fight over my dead body for one more housing unit? Hell no, never happened. Maybe it needs to happen, maybe it will happen, but in my lifetime, it has never happened. So, but people will sue, they will, do everything possible to stop a housing project because it might add one more car to their street, or it might sacrifice one tree that will be regrown because it has to be replanted. But, so anyway, Yeah, I like your point, but I do think the market with government intervention mandating a percentage of affordability combined with incentives of density bonus is making an impact, and it's not a small impact. But
I'm always gonna say though, that is true, however, getting deeper than very low income, which is 50%, 30 to 50%, getting those ELI units, I don't see it happening anywhere in the market. And we need, not only do we need government subsidy in those units, and we also need, we have a housing authority. They put vouchers into projects that help further subsidize, the Section 8, they're called housing choice vouchers now. There needs to be deep subsidy because there are people that are not, you've got a disabled 80-year-old man. He's not gonna re-enter the workforce. You're not gonna help him improve his income. And if you don't help him, because most seniors in California have zero retirement income and probably no savings in their bank, most seniors in California, that guy's in a lot of trouble unless you have a very, very specific intervention to help him. But if you do help him, odds are, and what we've seen in our community is 9 times out of 10, he's going to be able to live the rest of his life out in dignity in a home and be stable. So there's,
Yeah.
Can
I make another comment? Fred Hughes is not here tonight, but he was going to be, I understand. But he was one of the authors of Measure H, which was back how many years ago? Something like that. And I was a supporter of that, and a lot of other people were too. It failed because it required 2/3, I think, vote. And Measure H was about taxing to generate public income for these kinds of subsidies. So again, it's about priorities. We tax for parks, we tax for schools, we tax for sewers, we tax for streets, et cetera, et cetera. Do we tax for affordable housing?
Thank you for bringing up Measure H. That actually brings me into our next section of questions touching on supply. And Ray, I'd love it if you could speak to Measure A, which passed in Santa Clara County in 2016. It created a $950 million affordable housing bond. This was huge for Santa Clara County. Can you please speak to how the housing stock has been transformed through this measure?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, first of all, to the 2/3 point, which is what's required right now in California if you're going to pass a general obligation bond, a housing bond. We got 67% of the vote. We needed 66 to get it through. So it was and that was probably in a time when housing was by far the most supported topic in the Santa Clara County community. But we passed a $950 million affordable housing bond. Wow. It was the largest bond ever, a huge amount of money for affordable housing. What was unique about it was $700 million of that $950 million was dedicated to the development of supportive and extremely low-income housing. So the deepest level of affordability, serving people that were formerly been on the streets, getting them back into housing. Prior to that in Santa Clara County, we've done very little development. Today, 8 years later after its passage, we have 55 developments funded and over 6,000 units in the pipeline in 12 cities across Santa Clara County. I'll say a couple things about it. One, we still have a lot of homeless people in San Jose and Santa Clara County. It has not changed the dynamic of the challenges that we're facing because systemic disinvestment in affordable housing and deeply affordable housing for decades and decades doesn't get changed with one bond or one measure. It takes time and it takes deep, sustained investment. So you want to have continued revenues. On the other side, though, I've been to, in the last year and a half, I've been to 20 grand openings. So, and I've seen families living in their homes in Santa Clara, Palo Alto, Gilroy, San Jose, and it is transformative. The stories that I've seen and the help and support that's been provided to these people has been tremendous. And on top of all that, those folks in housing, 94% of them have remained housed for a year. 91% of them have remained housed for 3 years or more. So we see this intervention is really working to change people's lives. But it took more, the money from the county was a great help, but it was a community coming together. was developers, nonprofit affordable housing developers who were willing to step up and take on these new projects that maybe they hadn't dealt with before. It was cities like Morgan Hill approving 100% affordable housing projects. We had a project in Los Altos, the first ever 100% affordable housing project in Los Altos. So these communities have rallied and they've said, we want housing here. We know that we need to be a part of the solution. So it's everyone coming together. And then it's local government stepping up and working in tandem. So the city of San Jose, county of Santa Clara, our local housing authority, everybody stepping up and saying, this is what we're going to contribute. So that funding source was a rallying point, and it gave people a North Star of what we were trying to get to, but then everyone had to get on board and work with it. But it's been tremendous.
It's a great inspiration for our county, for sure. And later we'll touch on the public-private partnership and the political will required to get it passed, and how we can create something similar here in our county, perhaps. Elaine, I'd like it if you could please touch on what is currently being developed to address these gaps that we've been talking about all evening. Where are the developments? What are they? What is coming down the pipeline for affordable housing developments?
Well, there's developments throughout the county. Our organization, we have a affordable housing project tracker on our website, which allows you just click and it'll show you all the different projects that are in the works, completed, still, in conversation, groundbreaking, the whole nine. And
Amazing.
yeah, it is.
Check that out. We'll email out the link on
Yeah,
Housing
that'll be
Santa
great.
Cruz County website. You can see all these projects.
It is. It's exciting, and to his point as well. Tomorrow I'm attending the grand opening of the housing project on Capitola Road, which is literally 1 block from my house. And you have to celebrate the wins. You just have to, right? And one thing I want to share about that, I drove past that space for the last 10 years. And one day I drove past there, the trees were gone, because you talked about the trees. There was like 30 trees and they were gone. And I remember my neighbors being upset, right? Nothing had happened yet, and they were really upset about the people gonna move in, the parking and all that stuff. And what I share that to say, because we got to witness it from start to finish, because I literally live the next street over. When the dentist and the medical building opened up, my neighbors showed up. They were there. See, because I think what helps us with these projects, right? Not just going and clicking on the button, but being a part of the growth of it. Like, I feel like I helped build that space up the street from my house because I was open to it, knowing again, and part of it could be growing up in a housing project in New York. I know the strength of a community. And I know when you have communities and people thriving, we can build on that. We've moved mountains growing up in the Bronx, and we didn't have a dime, right? But, so I said it to say, there's a lot of stuff in the works. I can tell you, actually just met with John a couple weeks ago about his projects, because one of the things we do endorse projects, and we support and we advocate for them. But to continue that trend of allowing projects to happen, right? Because, the amazing groundbreaking that we celebrated last Monday, I was shocked. I didn't know it took 20 years to get us to where we were Monday. 20 years. I was like, whoa, people don't have time to wait 20 years to have a safe, stable place to call home. There's just something wrong with that. And so, I use my example of living up the street from this grand opening that we're gonna go to tomorrow, because I've got to see the people moving already. I got to see them shopping at the stores up the street from our house. That's a community, and that's what we want, and that's what I will talk about, right? Let's talk about those things, the success stories, because what I can tell you is there are a lot of people, that's been doing this work for years that I call it an internal tiredness around things not being able to move. Right? And so when you talk about those gaps, we gotta get ourselves out the way and allow those gaps to be filled by, people such as John and our other friends and all the other developers and the county and the city, whether that looks like a bond measure. And all transparency, I was the campaign manager for Measure H. It was a gut punch when we didn't win. It wasn't like we didn't try. So that we could bring homes here to people who really need it. And so, again, it's gonna take all of us, like come election times, when things come across in the ballot, we need those yeses, because those yeses are what build homes. The no's don't build homes.
Thank you for sharing that story. I've had a very similar experience watching these developments pop up all around us, and you think about units and numbers of cars, and then you see the families, the humans, the community, like you said, it's really beautiful. Would anybody else like to chime in about the developments emerging, what is currently being built to address the gaps in affordable housing?
Well, I was thinking of building on Ray's comment about the goals the state establishes for different income levels. And generally across the state, communities struggle with developing units for the lowest income. But I do want to shout out to the city of Santa Cruz. So the last 8 years, they hit all their targets. Yeah. So, what's going on there? So I like to think of, can we learn from success, learn from what's going well? And I think it's a combination of elected leadership support, as well as the internal staff who are committed to moving things in a positive direction and making projects happen faster. And building partnerships, you alluded to this, between the key parties that you need to bring together. If you need services, come talk to us or the health agency. If you need subsidies for these deeply affordable units, you have a relationship with the housing authority. So it takes the village to make those projects happen. And the staff who help build those relationships are really key. The other thing I wanted to highlight today is the state has this program called the Pro Housing Designation Program. We've talked a lot about local governments really expressing their commitments to housing as a vital public resource. And that's one way our local governments can do that. And the city of Santa Cruz is designated as one of the, I think there's now 50 pro-housing communities around the state. But it's the only jurisdiction, and I work for the county, so I'm talking to my county colleagues. There's a checklist of things you can do in terms of government policies and investment to meet these standards. And it's kind of a checklist of how do you transform from an anti-housing to a pro-housing community. So I talk a lot about, well, how do we get all of our cities to get through that checklist and make that formal commitment? And we have a jurisdiction here that's done it that we can learn from. And if we can get all of the other jurisdictions, Scotts Valley, Capitola, Watsonville, and the county where I work, to commit, I think we'll start to see better results on the RENA goals. And that's one of the things that they expect on the checklist, that you're really committed and you have the right players to get to the, not just the market rate, but the deeply affordable needs. So to all of you, talk to your electeds about pro-housing designation, and have you looked into it?
We want to be a pro-housing city. Yes, thank you.
Cities and county.
County.
County's a big
County.
part of the
Big time.
community.
Yes.
I think it's like 58% of the area of the county as a whole is the unincorporated area.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
So we've got to step up as well.
Thank you.
That's good.
So, John, as someone who understands the various challenges that developers face, what do you see as the path forward for the projects that we need? Perhaps the path forward, perhaps expediting that path, as we had mentioned. How do we get there?
Oh, boy. Well, I think you all have touched on it a little bit. I can't help, because I deal on a day-to-day on the minutia of these projects, right? Trying to move them past the starting line into the finish line, hopefully. But, all these housing objectives, pro-housing, the state incentives are great. Unfortunately, it doesn't really get down to the frontline soldiers. And Dennis is smiling here. He's an architect and does what I do for a lot of projects. And we struggle on a daily basis with people who are entrenched in bureaucracy. And I have to take a step back. It's a very difficult job. I worked as a planner. I mean, they're trying to balance multitude priorities, right? And housing just isn't the only priority, although we like to heighten its relative importance. But it's tough for them, I understand. But the leadership and the community has got to let them know that taking 6 months for an SB 9 approval, which the state's SB 9 land division was supposed to be a facilitated, efficient land division process. Special, just affected 2023, and the county has approved, I think, one of them. And the city's approved and recorded a map for 2 of them. And this was supposed to be a huge source of missing middle housing. And basically you could do multiple units on single-family zone property and divide single-family zone properties. So again, I'm just trying to use that as an example to say that I think right now, as I said before, the pendulum has swung. And I think to be elected in this town, you have to talk about housing. You have to express, whether it's hot air or warm air or cold air, about the housing objectives. You have to talk about it. You have to talk it. But the problem is when the priorities and that you have to balance those priorities comes down, the soldiers in the front line are still just resistant as not ever, but it's still a struggle, a major struggle. And leadership, it's a corporate mentality. What's that? Anyway, there's another term for it, but let's facilitate, let's say yes. I think Elaine said that. We have to, as a planning staff, public works staff, we have to start saying yes instead of our starting point is no. Show me more. Refine the plans again. Dennis was just telling me 4 times to get an ADU approved. Plans, submit plans, comments back. Use resubmit, comments back. Resubmit, comments back. Literally, I've been it's a nightmare. 3-4 times to do the simplest. If we had more time, I could tell you just an amazing story. But I won't. But it's dumbfounding how what happened. It's unbelievable. And ultimately, the city agreed. But it took us days and hours of the client's time and money, and my time and money, and the architect's time and money to convince them of this nonsensical ruling they were making. But anyway, that's just.
I think for me it's a psychological shift. So there's the policy shift, but then like the foot shoulder idea, there also is like a mental emotional shift that has to happen at the local level. That the period of time that you were alluding to earlier, the 70s, we were anti no. So that the culture and the systems are built to say no,
Right.
As opposed to you want to do an ADU? I'm so excited. Come on in. Let me tell you how to do it. As opposed to turn in your homework and let me get my red pen. I'll give it back to you. Give it in a month. I'll give it back to you. Fix it. We won't tell you how to fix it, but figure it out. Give it back again. That's kind of the culture that we have. It's really a fairly simple shift. Is we want housing. We want to help you. But how do we get that mindset to change?
Just real quickly, one of the main things to reinforce that is the decision makers, when a conflict occurs, which it inevitably will, whose side are they on? Well, it's politics, so they're going to tend to listen to their constituents who are complaining about somebody who built an ADU that overshadows their yard or whatever. So that's again, the balancing act that has to happen. But where does the priorities shift? That's what, to me, that's what's got to happen. And it's got to come from the top down to the lower level.
So let's talk about subsidies and incentives. That's one way that things can shift from the top down. What subsidies and incentives currently exist, and what do we need for both individuals and for developers?
Let's
John, or Ray,
Sorry.
if you'd like to start.
I'd like to talk about what's going away first. So, okay, just quick history. Jerry Brown's governor. We're facing worst, financial crisis the state has faced in a long time. He decides, and he said this a lot, that the governor didn't believe that housing, affordable housing specifically, was a priority. And he dissolves the redevelopment agency, which was the primary driver of affordable housing funding in California. And it just crushed us. I mean, we went from developing, in San Jose, for instance, we went from 10 or 15 affordable housing developments to 1 or 2 a year after redevelopment went away. And 1 or 2 was a stretch, it was hard. We go forward to Newsom's, Governor Newsom is in office. In his first term in office, Governor Newsom directs more money to homelessness and to housing than any governor in the history of California, right? So we see this huge influx of funding, but it's short-lived. It's short-lived, and right now, we're facing a deficit. We haven't faced deficits in our government at the state and local level for a long time. So it's new, it's shocking. We've got a multi-billion-dollar deficit. The first thing that gets cut is affordable housing funding. So all of the state programs that make affordable housing development possible are on the chopping block right now, with the exception of tax credits. Everything, every state grant program that can put money to build housing for veterans, that can build housing for seniors, that can build housing for homeless people, it's all being proposed to be cut in the recent revise. So we have to really think about what our priorities are. And if our priorities are to build housing for people who need it and to make investments, we have to have sustained investment over time and dedicated revenue sources. And the only way to get that, unfortunately, because of the tax system that we have in place and what we've done to kind of constrain what California can do, is through these bond measures. So I would say, we need to have, I know Santa Cruz is considering a local bond measure. I think we need to really dial in on that, because if we don't have that kind of dedicated revenue source, I think the market will allow for some development. Especially when the economy rebounds, market rate developers will be able to come in, we'll get some housing development going. But that deepest affordability, that stuff that's going to preserve and support our most vulnerable residents over time, will not get built. So I do think that we need to come together and prioritize that type of funding and make deep investments if we want to change.
I'll just say, that housing bond will eventually happen and my organization will be running it. But more to come on that.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
And on the subsidy piece, I also think the federal government has a role with subsidies. So the long-term subsidies for people who really need that, seniors, people with disabilities, people living on fixed incomes. Section 8 program that people often refer to, but only 1 in 4 households that actually qualify actually get those vouchers. President Biden, during his campaign speech, talked about a universal housing voucher program. It kind of went away after he was elected. Yep. But how do we get more federal dollars to show that same level of commitment? Because these projects aren't going to work with that kind of long-term subsidy that we need from the federal government. And I don't know how many of you have read Matthew Desmond. He wrote a book Evicted, and he's got a book Poverty in America. Heard him on a talk show the other day, and he talked about if we just collected the tax that the top 1% of earners owe at the federal level that they're not paying, we could get universal housing vouchers for everyone who's eligible. So it goes back to priorities, and how do we build up the political will to make this a priority? I think it takes all of us to chime in and vote and show up at meetings like this.
And housing at the federal government level, just so you know, represents 0.4% of the total federal budget. So that tells you where our priorities come when it comes to housing. Yeah, you hear Section 8, all these things, 0.4%. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's an interesting number, difficult to grasp. So we talked a little bit about political will. Let's dive right in. In this world of housing development, affordable housing development, who is empowered to make impactful decisions? Who has leadership? And are there areas in which you feel stronger leadership may be needed? I heard some murmurs that we all play a role here and we all may have a message to share and use our voice. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, John alluded to this a little bit. When there's a question about a project, who shows up to oppose the project? Who shows up to support it? And generally the answer is there's no one showing up to support it. And the folks who are property owners, typically safer, kind of nested and comfortable in the community, are the ones who are much more likely to show up and oppose projects. And they're also the ones who are more likely to show up at board meetings and elections and mobilize people to vote. So we need some countervailing pressure there. Otherwise, elected leaders are going to represent the people that really show up and are voting for them. So we need other folks who have a different view to show up at those meetings. And I think this is part of the pendulum swing. I've gone to a few meetings like, oh, there's actually a few people speaking up in support of this project here. So when the number of people who support the project outweigh those that are opposing, well, then we really have swung the pendulum. And then I think the elected leaders will feel like, oh, we really need to support this project. And at the staff level, I'm one of those staff, and I'm sure there's people in the room who will throw barbed wires at me at some point, I'll make some bad decision. But how do we get out of the way and make it easier for these projects to happen? We have some responsibility in terms of leadership at the staff level to understand how we can get caught up in our bureaucratic needs and the layers of reports and things that we feel like we have to do for accountability purposes. But one example is, and I think this is partially why the governor is not investing so much in housing, the Newsom administration spent a lot of money relative to prior administrations on housing and homelessness, but it was a one time when the times were good. And there was a lot of extra money. And the auditor just came out with a report saying, we don't know where all this money went and if it was effective. And so the governor's message now is, I gave you all at the local government level lots of money one time and you didn't use it wisely, so why should I give you more? And for me, underneath that is, well, the money wasn't given to us in a nice, clear way. I did some math based on this auditor's report. If the money that was set aside through various, I think there were 30 different programs, 9 different state agencies that released the money. So right off the bat, look, that's a problem. That the money is going to all these different agencies, different requirements, different people interpreting the regulations. If we just pooled all that money together, we could have had $2,000 a month subsidies for every homeless household in the state for 5 years straight. But instead, it went to all these special programs, hiring staff like me to write reports. We're just not using those dollars as wisely as we could to really meet the needs. So I feel like sometimes we all need to take a step back. And I work in a department where the governor's cutting some programs that are for people experiencing homelessness. And it hurts to see and feel the impact that's gonna have on folks. But I'm also the same person who says, we can't have all these different programs. Can we have one program where you put all the money? So I can't have it both ways. I can't advocate for these programs, but also say, let's simplify things. But we need to make it simpler to make these programs effective and do things that really get to the core issues that are making it hard for people. And it's that gap between the incomes and the cost of running that housing unit. We've got to close those gaps. And everything else is kind of side commentary until we close that gap.
You know, I'm sitting here thinking about, so I had a scheduling conflict tonight because I was invited to be at the city council meeting to advocate for the food bin project. See, to me, I thought that is a project where everyone involved wants that project. And it keeps going back and forth. And that's a prime example of, I feel like people are conflicted. It's this internal confliction that when you talk about the changing of the narrative, it's this confliction because the actual food bin wants the project. They want to collaborate together. They want this neighborhood to happen. And I'm hoping by now that it got the thumbs up. But you know, I'm sitting here thinking about that's a prime example of it's working. It really can work. I mean, if it'd be different if food bin didn't want it and they were feeling like being pushed out, but that's not even what's happening. They want the project to be there. The food bin is not gonna go anywhere, you know, but they're gonna build housing there so they can build another community on the west side of Santa Cruz. That's a great thing. Why would you wanna fight that? But seriously, I'm asking serious questions. Why would you wanna fight that?
But why do they wanna fight it?
You don't ask me.
I can tell you why. I mean, it's just typical things, parking, lack of parking, traffic. There's an article in the paper today from a deaf woman who's claiming that it will affect her ability to hear because the sound will reverberate. But, and then the people next door are concerned about the shadows that will be cast on their property. There's a little creek that's basically in a pipe most of the way, but it daylights on that end of the property. So now it's a incredibly valuable riparian resource.
And there might be some endangered species, probably.
Yeah, and so you know, I'm not belittling that person who wrote that article in the Sentinel, but I was involved with a project kind of remotely up on Ocean Street, and it was fought by people who, it was the crematorium site up on Ocean Extension, you know where the graveyard is up there. 36 units were approved. They sued them because you were putting homes next to a crematorium, and there's mercury in the fillings, and the mercury that's burned and cremated will get in the air and pollute those people. Now, mind you, it's an infinitesimal amount. All the studies showed it was an infinitesimal amount, but those people had a lawyer behind them and the money behind them to sue them. And they basically, the project's not built. And I mean, it's probably 15 years old now.
And the crew that put the project together was like, we don't want to do this, and now we're too tired.
Yeah. The interesting thing, the people who sued them live next door too. So the claims they're making about the pollution are affecting them as much as anybody else. But they're not suing, they're suing on behalf of the future residents, not themselves.
You know, I do want to say that I can't remember if it was my first time or second time speaking with Neighbors to Neighbors. We were on the west side, and I challenged someone in a respectful way. Remember this? You know, because again, this conflicted. The person was bummed that they were stepping over two unhoused people to get here, but also didn't want something built. And I remember challenging them, saying you can't have both. So let's work through that. And I say that to say that we have to continue to have these conversations with people, because there is people that are conflicted. They do want housing and they have the but how do we, you know, as Dr. Tiffany says, how do you get them from a me to a we, where we're working together to build homes here in Santa Cruz County? Because a lot of it, if you get people one-on-one, they're telling a different story. I can tell you, they're telling a different story. I got 3 emails that night from people saying I swayed them to the other side. And I didn't really sway them, they swayed themselves. Right? Because a lot of it, I believe, is just a lot of fear. And this is just an outsider, somebody, you know, coming from a big city to this beach town. People want this to be a beach town, but what I know is everything changes. My next door neighbor, she just turned 95 and still lives by herself. She says, if there's one thing I want you to know is everything changes. She said, I mean, and so it's so important to say that here, because things change, right? But I still hear a lot of conversations that going back 40, 50 years. And that's all said with respect.
Thank you, Elaine. So, Ray, what kind of funding specifically is necessary to develop the housing that our county needs?
Every kind of funding.
Everything. Piggy bank.
You know, I talk about affordable because that's my focus.
Yeah.
And I will say that we've made it as difficult as you could possibly imagine to build affordable housing in this country from a financing perspective. Every deal that we work on, my organization funds projects. So we fund developers to buy the land, and then we fund them to go through the entitlement process, which we call redevelopment. Every project that we see has 7 to 10 different financing sources. So you have to assemble, your grants from, if you're developing the city, you have to go to the city of San Jose, apply for a grant or a loan. You have to go to the county of Santa Clara. Then you have to go talk to a bank and get a bank to finance the gap. And maybe you're going to the housing authority to get project-based vouchers in, and you still probably haven't assembled enough money yet. So you go to the state and you apply once a year now for a state grant, and you hope to get it. And you probably don't get it, and you have to apply 3 times before it comes in. And then when you're done with all that, you have to enter into this system called the tax credit system, and go through, the most bizarre process you could ever imagine to try and finance the development of a unit. And then people say, why does it take so long? Why is it so long? I think we need a hell of a lot more local subsidy, and we need to start rethinking the way that we finance affordable housing development. And my organization has benefited greatly from pretty large philanthropic contributions from Cisco and then Apple. I'd like to say that the private sector needs to step up, but here in Santa Cruz, we're excluded from so much of that. So we're kind of on our own in many different ways, even though we've got a lot of big corporations that do business here. So I think our first and only step and it's good to hear that we've got an agency that's gonna be leading as an affordable housing bond, and we need to pass it. And we need to do a lot better than we did in 2018, when, you know, we got like 52, 53% of the vote, when we needed 2/3. I'll say, to accomplish this, we have to change the way we get affordable housing funded. So on the ballot this year, there's going to be a measure, hopefully passed by the legislature, called ACA 1 right now. It's gonna show up on your ballots, I hope.
Yes.
Fingers crossed. It's gonna lower the threshold from 2/3 down to 55%. It's gonna give us a shot to actually go for this money. So I think we need local subsidy. The thing is, here in Santa Cruz, we have really good actors. We've got a city that seems pretty committed to doing the work. We've got our first mayor that's focused on it, and Mayor Keeley. And then we've got a county, that actually has an office that is thinking about housing and health as an interrelated thing. So we've got these good actors that want to do good. We just have to give them the resources to do good, and then we have to make sure that we're utilizing all the legislation that exists right now to go quickly through the process and not let our own bureaucracy get in the way.
Yes, absolutely.
So local money in our control that we can do good with.
Thank you guys.
One thing I would say on top of that, this is Affordable Housing Month. For the whole month of May, Housing Santa Cruz County has hosted over 20 different events, and everything's housing focused. On Thursday, there is a event called Affordable Housing Finance 101. It's our community partners from Housing Trust Silicon Valley. They will be here at the community center, Jade Street, at 1:30. I invite you all to attend if you can, because they're really gonna dive deep into the bigger picture of what that looks like. So I encourage everybody to attend if you can.
It really is so illuminating to hear what the
Yeah.
journey is like to
Yeah.
build an affordable housing development. I wonder,
What was the subject of that again?
Affordable Housing Finance 101.
Oh.
I think if people really understand the bigger picture, I believe it helps people make more informed decisions, right?
How
So,
to get the money in the first place, you're saying?
but it's more than that. It's that whole process. Because people get stuck in it. Well, it's already been 5 years. Why bother? But once you understand something, then it allows a person, I've noticed, to make I call it a healthier choice versus just giving up.
Can I jump on that one?
Please.
As a healthcare person getting into the housing world and learning that it takes 7 to 10 applications to get a project going, and I went to the Affordable Housing 101, and I went to the 201 on tax credits, and I left thinking, okay, I understand what you have to do, but this makes no sense. So, in addition to learning how things are, we have to ask ourselves, is this really how it has to be?
Right. That's right.
Because it doesn't.
That's right.
I mean, an imperfect example, the governor and the legislature during COVID, we had a lot of people who were unhoused moving into hotels to try to help people to be safe, and there was this idea, let's convert hotels into permanent housing. The idea, let's have one pot of money that can do the whole project. So there's some issues with that, but that's that idea of one pot of money. I don't have to chase 7 or 8 funding sources, and the cost per unit goes down, the amount of time you spend on the project goes down. As someone who's done affordable and market rate, the number of funding sources and stuff you have to track, costs go up significantly. Comparing market rate versus affordable, people wonder why are affordable housing projects? It's because of all the different funding sources and rules we've created and processes that jack up the price beyond what's really necessary.
Only, I don't know how people really understand what the average cost of an affordable unit is. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I've heard 700, 800 in
Yeah.
San Francisco, a unit,
That's
for like
here,
a
too.
small unit, like a 500 square foot unit. $700,000.
Santa Monica, 1 million now.
Yeah, for one million.
Unit.
Well, some of the units in Santa Clara are in that 800 to $1 million, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, something's wrong with that. Now, a market rate builder would build that unit for, half that price, I would say. But it's not gonna be affordable, right? It's not gonna get the subsidies, the end product's not gonna rent at the level that the affordable is gonna do it.
And I don't think a unit should cost $1 million.
No, it
I don't.
shouldn't.
There is,
No,
but it is an inherent problem with how we finance
Yeah.
the units and the value of what we get out of it. To your point, we're paying more money, but we also typically get a 55-year deed restriction at a fixed rent level for people. So that means that place is going to remain affordable for a person over time. So there is, while there is a greater investment, the returns, I think, for the community, for the most vulnerable residents in our community are far greater as well with affordable housing. So it's, there's nothing else like it. We just need to figure out how to do it better. And there's a way.
So, can you all speak to political will? What does that mean? And why do we need it? Yeah. How can we build political will here in Santa Cruz?
You see it right now?
Right?
That's
This is it.
a small level, grassroots things, gotta start and then it spreads. No other way. Seems to me.
I also think connecting people with folks who may have been in a similar place at a different part of their life or their career, who've kind of gone through the journey of becoming pro-housing supportive. So finding examples across the hill or a neighboring county, like, oh, and I brought up the city of Santa Cruz, they're moving forward with pro-housing, they made a culture shift. So how do we introduce that culture shift to other city staff and elected leaders? Like, what made that possible? So just getting people to talk to each other, to believe it can happen, and kind of burst through the, oh no, we can't do that, it's too difficult. Well, actually, just go 2 blocks over here and I can introduce you to someone who's figured it out. And so those kinds of one-on-one connections and going to where positive things are happening, we tend to go to where it's not working. But if we can highlight and build connections off of where things are really moving, that tends to inspire people more.
Well, so to wrap us up before we open up for Q&A, what can the community do to help? You've mentioned lots of great ideas throughout this panel, but one highlight, what can everybody here tonight do to help with affordable housing, help with the housing solution for our county?
So I think it's been mentioned here, you show up at hearings, you vote for those people who make a real commitment and not just speak to the issue of affordable housing. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's the same. I mean, I think, I'm imagining most of the people are coming here on a, what is it, Tuesday night after Memorial Day, probably show up at other meetings too. But I will tell you, the power, I used to work in city government for the city of San Jose, and the power of a neighbor showing up and saying, hey, I want this housing built down the street for me, is you'll get elected officials' attention because they don't hear it that often. So it is not an understatement to say the power of your voice in that minute or 90 seconds of public comment that you get is tremendous, especially if you have a stake in the thing that's being built. So I encourage everybody, show up at the ballot box, cast your votes, and definitely come. And when you believe in a project, tell people you believe in it. Write a letter, show up and speak.
Adding to that, I think, try to think of little things, little steps that people can take. One is you can sign up for Housing Santa Cruz County newsletter.
I was just gonna say, become an advocate.
To find out when there are meetings that you can show up at, or when there's opportunities for advocacy, and the same for us, Housing for Health Partnership. It's just we announce that information, so little things you can do to stay informed and contribute in some way. Folks who own property, explore, I know we've made ADU sound difficult, but thinking about building units or renting out rooms. I mean, we have programs in our department that are looking for folks who are willing to rent out rooms to students who are looking for housing or youth coming out of foster care. So I think everybody here has to explore, what you're able or willing to do. But I encourage you to leave us, just do one little thing after tonight that's a little bit different from what you did before you came in. And that's how we move the pendulum. And it could be as simple as just signing up to get information on what's going on, and then that can move you to the next step.
Yeah, 'cause that's what I was gonna tell you, join our mailing list, and it gives you an opportunity to get involved, to do some advocacy work, whether that's showing up at a city council meeting, like tonight, we sent out an email, asked people to please go down there and support the project. You can write a letter if you don't wanna go in person. attend the different events that we host. It's really about getting involved, and you don't have to jump in with all feet. I mean, we'd love for you to, but it's really about staying engaged and staying current on what's going on. And when it comes down to ballot measures, please vote yes. And I also encourage people, if you don't understand, ask somebody who can answer you, not somebody who's gonna talk you out of it. Yeah.
That's a great insight. Thank you all so much. Let's give it up for our panel. All right, and now we have some time for an audience Q&A. So thank you all for patiently holding your questions. Start with Yanko.
All right. Yeah. One of the things I observed is we have a particular project, the Anton Pacific downtown, which was originally marketed to the city council as workforce housing. But then lo and behold, the place is built, and it's $6K for a 2-bedroom unit, and is presently only like 13% leased, and it's been on the market now for a couple months, and its move-in, I think, is in June, which is kind of really interesting. So the place is still mostly empty. Then we have the Pacific Station South, which is right next to it, which is, I guess by now, completely leased, most likely, or in the process of being completely leased, with over 1,000 applications submitted for that. You know, and then plus many of the units have vouchers attached to them. And so, yeah, you know, it seems like, you know, the market rate is not doing much for our community compared to the affordable housing. So we really do need to find ways to get that political will at all levels of government to pursue that affordable housing, because that's where the need is, clearly, not in this luxury resort style housing.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Yes, Dennis?
Yes, you know, I'm gonna bring this back to the home church here in Capitola. And I've been a resident here for 50 years. And I was a city council member for 16 of that, planning commission for 10. So I've done my time in civil service, and I've seen housing, I've seen this city change. If you look at Capitola, it's 4 square miles. One of the biggest issues in creating housing is land, of having land. And what interesting statistic there is, Capitola has 430 required units, while Watsonville has 283 units, and it's Watsonville 16 times the size of Capitola. So is that based on where you want people to live or not? What I get to is that when I first moved here, it was affordable. In the 1970s, you could come and buy a Capitola, and you could buy a house here for, I'd say, $130,000, something like that. And what's happened here, and I'm in the land use planning and architectural design business also, so I've seen it, and I see who my clients are, is that Capitola in the last 10 years, if not more so the last 4 years, has been totally bought up by Santa Cruz. So all these homes that were rentals at one time, or were on the market for sales, have been taken off the market, and now they are second homes for people who maybe someday maybe will retire and move here, but they're not living here now. Go to Depot Hill, it's a ghost town. Go to River Terrace where I live, half the houses on my street are vacant. What we're not doing is we're not taking care of our inventory that we have. I don't think we can ever build ourselves out of the housing issue. I don't think it's possible, but certainly we can try. But what we can do is we can find ways to protect the inventory that we have. And I'll tell you, Pleasure Point's the next example. Pleasure Point is all turning into second homes. Anywhere that's going to be in the coastal zone, which is pretty much a third or half of Santa Cruz County, is subject to this kind of a purchase. And at Santa Clara Valley, the wealthy community there can afford to come in and buy it. Nobody local, my son, my neighbors can't afford to buy a house here because they're moving away. But my point is that we have a housing stock that we have to find a way to protect. And I think Santa Cruz started to do that. They had that initiative on the ballot to control second homes. I don't think it was really written correctly, but you can do that. And I think that's acceptable to a community. And so my point is that yes, we can fight for more housing, we can't build ourselves completely out of it. But what we have out there in communities like Capitola and the city of Santa Cruz particularly, and somewhat Scotts Valley and Watsonville, is that find ways to protect your housing stock that keeps it available for rentals and for resale.
Thank you for that. Very interesting insight. Yes?
A question for you, Ray. You said that Santa Cruz County didn't have access to private funding. Can you explain what you meant by that and why you might think that?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we have access to private financing, so we can work with the banks to get loans, that kind of thing. But I mean more private philanthropic investment has been pretty limited historically in Santa Cruz County. Like we've never, while we're a bedroom community, I'm born and raised in Santa Cruz, by the way. My parents lived on Depot Hill until they passed. So I've seen it and firsthand, and the wealth of Silicon Valley just doesn't find its way over to Santa Cruz. And you'll see.
It does to purchase second home.
It does to purchase second home, but not to preserve our room business. So right, exactly. So I mean, so there's the Partnership for the Bay's Future, which was a $500 million affordable housing loan fund that was set up by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. It served the 9 Bay Area counties. We are not a Bay Area county. Yeah. So it's just, it is, there are organizations like Looker comes over here, which is part of Google. We start to think that, but I just have not seen a successful strategy. Even though we've got a lot of tech executives living here, working over there, I haven't seen the right strategy to get that wealth to come back here yet. And I think it's a real problem. I'd love to see it if big corporations started investing here. But we do have to change some of our land use laws and appear like we're a more open community to dense development too.
Politically, I'm
Yeah.
not sure they want to.
Yeah, if we call an 8-story building in downtown Santa Cruz a skyscraper, as a lot of my friends do, we're not gonna look like we're in a place where we're ready for, we're ready for those deep investments and we're serious about housing. So we have to put up, the bat signal and let people know that we're doing some stuff here. Come on over to Santa Cruz.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yes?
So I lived in Capitola for about 23 years, and we basically have no neighbors. And that is, I think, the state of most of our neighborhoods in Capitola, really. The city has done a couple of projects, which I'm super proud of, the one you mentioned on Capitola Road, and we fought some neighborly battles over that one too. I am discouraged to listen to all of you though, because I've been bragging around to all my friends who don't live in California about how enlightened we are in California because of Newsom mandating all these cities to build all this housing. And so is that now evaporated, or what, or how is it to be funded, or how is that gonna happen?
So that's what I was saying. Most of those projects downtown are market rate driven, benefiting from the density bonus provisions, which says if you provide affordable housing, you can do more market rate housing to offset the cost of that affordable housing.
In that unit?
In that project. The one you were speaking of, they ended up donating land to make the affordable housing more, and I think it was very successful in terms of that, but there's another side of that argument which you raised as well. But again, this isn't getting to the very low economic levels. It's getting to the very 30 to 50%. It is getting to, but below that, it's not. Newsom, I think Newsom and the various assemblymen and senators have done a heck of a job in terms of passing laws that stimulate development. The RENA numbers, the regional housing allocation numbers, is taken seriously now. People can argue about how, is it an appropriate number or not? Does Capitola require too much? Watsonville not enough? But then all the other density bonus laws, Housing Accountability Act, the SB 9, which is a land division, ADU laws, it's incredible. I can't even keep up with it. I mean, I swear to God, it's amazing how many laws are coming down. And now there's a new SB 9 law coming out, I don't know if you heard about it, but it's to plug the holes of the SB 9. One of them being, you gotta make a decision, lower level county staff, in 60 days. Now, they take months to render a decision. But the state is saying, hey, this is unacceptable, you have to get them an answer in 60 days, yes or no. And generally it's gonna be yes, because the standards and rules are pretty clearly defined. Does that answer your question at all? I mean, it is making a difference. There's thousands of units on the books right now, and they're under construction.
Right.
It's happening. I mean, and people are gonna be
But
shocked.
it's not happening fast enough and it's too
No.
complicated.
All that of the above, for sure.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be this difficult. It is, but people are trying to do the best they can within that world. And from a selfish standpoint, chaos is opportunity too. I have to say, that's what gives me, as cynical as I can be up here, it's also an opportunity. That's my business, is working things through the system. And it's a complicated, screwed up system. But that's what an accountant makes their money. That's how a contractor makes his money. He figures out the problems and solves them. But anyway, it's not solving. One more thing, I'm sorry. I think we have to reposition ourselves in terms of how we think about the answer. As I said before, environmentalists would applaud themselves when they save that one tree. We build a house and we've lost because we didn't build 10. Well, no, we won for one. I mean, there's one family that has a house. So again, you gotta, I know it's not the answer, but it's an answer. And I think you gotta think about, the marginal, the success on the margins is worth something to those people who have that house or those few homes. I mean, I think you said, there's no way we're gonna solve it ultimately. I hate to say that, but I tend to agree. Yeah.
Thank you for that. See a few questions in the audience, so I'm gonna start a queue. We'll do Richard and then Kaylin, Eric in the front, and Tom in the back. Start with you, Richard.
Okay, first I'll just start with opinion and then I'll move to my question. Like you mentioned of cynicism, going back to why some people seem to be against more housing. I know it was mentioned like people might complain about trees or noise. I think part of it too is people outwardly, publicly say that they support housing, but then when it comes to a vote on those measures, like the one measure that didn't pass or the other measure that barely passed, a lot of those people are already homeowners themselves, and so they see increasing the supply of housing as potentially affecting the value of their home. And so they vote against it because they want to keep the value of their home higher. Or they see, well, this will increase taxes, I don't want to pay more taxes. So that's that. Moving on to my question though, I know we talked about increasing supply, and I was wondering what avenues are we looking at to increase the supply? I know we mentioned a bit incentivizing possibly private builders to build more here, because I hear like 80% of the responses are usually looking at either federal, state, local funding, subsidized housing, but not so much of incentivizing private builders, either cutting out certain parcels and designating them as for residential use, or giving incentives to the builders to attract them to come over, or maybe even doing some kind of deregulations to attract those builders, or allowing them to build higher. Is there anything like that that's currently being considered?
Oh, absolutely. There's legislation that allowed development on churches, such that parking is not double counted. In other words, churches use parking once a week for 2 hours, maybe some workshops or whatever during the week, but you can now build housing on there and not double count the parking for the housing and the church. Schools, there's huge incentives for schools to provide housing. And the city of Santa Cruz is considering out on Swift Street, I believe they have a project. And that's, you're starting in Santa Clara, you've seen that, a lot of that, where the school district is building teacher housing. So there are things it's moving, and it's just, the train's kind of going. Well, like I say, I think the pendulum's gonna react to that pretty soon. You're gonna start seeing, when the buildings start going up around town, we'll see what's gonna happen. But
I'll just say, I don't mean to be a broken record on this, but I do think that deregulation at a certain point, when there isn't local government money, when there aren't funds to push for the deepest affordability, may have an effect that isn't so beneficial. Like right now, it's harder to finance market rate housing because we have a harder time projecting rents increasing over time. So, the operating income of the development, it's harder to get the right size loan. The market's a little bit tough right now. It's not always gonna be like that. And when it's easier to build market rate and we have a deregulated system, we're gonna see less and less affordable, and we're gonna see almost no deeply affordable. And those projects, if the market is too deregulated, are gonna outcompete anything else these deeply affordable developers, these mission-aligned developers are able to do. So I think we just have to have some guardrails in place to make sure that we're building a housing stock that represents the needs of everyone in our community. But I don't think it should get in the way of progress, I think, so.
Thank you. Love the diversity on our panel. It's amazing to hear the different opinions here. Thank you. All right, so now we have Caitlin and then Aaron and Tom next.
Okay, so you were mentioning how we have a lot on the chopping block due to California's massive deficit. So in the spirit of solutions, why we're all here, what do you suggest we do to either raise money as a state or redirect where we're going to be chopping? And also, Dr. Ratner, you were talking about money being distributed in the past, and you did the math, and you were like, there could be some money in the hands of people. So I'm just curious, along the lines of that question, if you had a magic wand and say you had substantial money at your fingertips, what would be the first priority that you have to make the biggest impact as far as housing solutions are concerned? Take it away.
Raise more money as a state. Just quick answer for me. I mean, I think this is not a popular opinion, but I think Prop 13 has killed us as a state in terms of our ability to raise our ability to figure out revenue measures on our own. So we use bonds and we use special taxes to get there. On the November ballot, Buffy Wicks is pushing forward a statewide bond, a housing bond. It'll be $10 billion probably for the state. That's real money that we can dedicate, that it will be committed and designated specifically for housing. So we have to be able to think about new revenue measures. It's the only option we have, because we've done away with our permanent source, was redevelopment. Redevelopment agency is gone. That's part of the past. So now we have to do special measures, and that's gonna mean, general obligation bond is a parcel tax. We have corporate head taxes, lots of unpopular things. We have to figure out what source we're willing to tax to get housing built, because we're not gonna find that revenue anywhere else. And in the case of Proposition 1, which just barely passed on the March ballot, we took a lot of money away from services to build housing. But we're kind of, robbing Peter to pay Paul here. So we need more. We don't need redistribution. We need more. And to do that, we're gonna have to take a little bit out of our wallets to do it.
I think some simplification also. It's just on the margins.
Yeah.
We add so much complexity to the money that we have that we're not using it as efficiently as we can. And I think really simple answer to your question is two big things: is single source for all units development. Don't have to go to 6 or 7. Can we just create a program like, yeah, we're gonna fund the whole unit. And 2, we need subsidies for the folks who are struggling with the lowest incomes. So this LA County created a flexible housing subsidy pool for people in the healthcare system. Started with the Hilton Foundation and the healthcare agency saying, we see housing is such a fundamental need in the healthcare system. We're setting aside money to subsidize people's rents. Why can't the state do that? And other communities have done similar things, but statewide, we could create a flexible housing subsidy pool. I think there's a tendency to say, oh, that's the federal government's responsibility. Yes, they should step up too, but in the meantime, can we kind of contribute and close that gap? It'd be a much more efficient use of dollars. to just close that gap between what it costs to live somewhere and what people have in terms of income,
Wow.
than all the other stuff that I spend time on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Eric, and then Tom, and then we'll do our next round of questions.
Thanks. Yeah, this is a great lead-in question. I write grants and do policy work for the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County, and I'm here because I want to be a housing advocate and not be that environmentalist that like shakes my fist. And so the funding, I mean, apart from this really convoluted system, which I don't know how to fix, the funding and the financing seems like one of the biggest problems. And I see it every day in my projects, and we have the state 7 different agencies that we fund, but I understand that as well. And I guess my question is, I was in Sacramento working on the climate bond, another bond proposal last week, and one of the things that came up was the housing bond, and one of the things they said is, oh shoot, well the Bay Area is working on a regional housing bond, and one of the reasons why we're not so sure if the state bond can go forward is we have this regional measure, and shoot, that might be difficult, and the thing that I noticed is it's a 9-county Bay Area housing bond, and I see the benefits of the 9-county Bay Area proposal for like Measure AA, which is like a $13 parcel tax for ecological restoration projects. And that makes sense. It's like tied into what touches the Bay. To me, I mean, the census looks at Santa Cruz and says, hey, this is part of the Bay Area. We've got people commuting over the hill. I guess my question is, like, is there any effort to maybe say, shoot, it's a 10-county Bay Area, let's get ourselves some access to that regional money and start just treating it like the region that it is rather than this island that's kind of special and unique. And I don't know if anyone's qualified to answer that, but just curious if there's been conversations saying, hey, let's get some of that Bay Area money.
Yeah, so here's the bummer about the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority, BAFA, is that it was actually created by underlying legislation 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that legislation created the container for money to go into. It didn't have any funds, but it created the container, and that container includes only the 9 Bay Area counties. And that was the work of another program called CASA, which was 4 years of work before that leading up to it. And I think we haven't had a powerful housing advocacy group in Santa Cruz until recently, and now we have a housing advocacy voice, you know? And that's what we need. We need to get in on it because, you know, I don't know that this regional housing bond is gonna pass, but I do think that there's going to be opportunities that come out of this process, and I think we have a chance now to get in the game because we're building housing. And we actually have people that are talking about housing and showing up for housing, and I think you guys have changed the game in many ways.
Thank you. Yeah, and we're very fortunate in my organization to have people who work for NPH in San Francisco who's on my board. So it keeps us in the loop and is always bringing us to the table. You know, working with Matt Weather from MBEC, because he's a part of that whole big bond that's happening right now as well. So we're inching our way, right? Because, you know, something I said, well, during COVID, we were considered the Bay Area. And I was like, all of a sudden, we got kicked out. I was like, all of a sudden, we're in the Bay Area, what's going on? Right, that's the reals. And so we're inching our way back in there.
Good.
So
Absolutely.
can I ask, I think some communities have a housing trust fund,
Yes.
right?
Sam.
We have a land trust fund, which is interesting, and it's pretty well funded by donors, correct?
The state is the biggest funder, but a lot of
The
private
state
support
is,
too.
but there's private, well, I don't know the percentage,
Both, yeah.
but yeah. I mean, has that ever just floated, that idea around here?
Yes.
Is there, okay, yeah, never went anywhere?
And I still need to learn more about the history. So Silicon Valley Housing Trust, so a plug for the event. There is a Monterey Bay Housing Trust Fund that's managed by Silicon Valley Housing Trust. And in theory, Santa Cruz County, Monterey, and San Benito are a part of it.
Yes.
There are projects that have gotten money from that fund. However, it hasn't gotten to scale. Really, that the kinds of additional money that's available from the state and other local jurisdictions contributing to bring in more money, it's not where it could be. But there is a structure there. I also think a lot of people feel like it's really hard to access. Going back to the conversation about all the hurdles you have to go through. It's because it's a small amount of money, it's really competitive. So you've kind of really got to be an expert like John to know how to get in the right package to get the money, because it's a small pot of money. On the land trust, I was very personally invested in the idea of using the land trust concept for housing. So one of the major issues in our country is the second-class status for renters. We have a lot of federal and state policy that advantages homeowners. I'm a homeowner and I have benefited from all those things, but it doesn't make sense to me. You know, tax write-offs and all the incentives that I get as a homeowner. I'm not struggling as much as a lot of renters. So one of the things I love about some of the land trust models is it's a co-ownership. So the land is owned by the land trust. They have a property on it, and folks own a unit or they own the house on the land, and they start to build up assets. And there's some really innovative projects with housing authorities. Someone has a voucher, they get the housing authority to help pay the mortgage, and they pay a little bit extra. So they're getting some assets. And the wealth disparities are, I think, a big part of why we have such a problem with housing. It's an option for land trusts to get more involved with housing projects.
Yes. Eric and I own it.
Where's the CLT? Where's the CLT?
Yeah.
Awesome question, thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, just a couple of comments and then a question. Lived here since the mid-'80s, and we're real pro-supporters of more and more and more housing, especially for the young folks, which is incredible, and how things have been decimated for young kids around here even to live here anymore. But I think I have one question about all these vacant commercial properties. I'm sure I'm just gonna be answering that, I'm sure it comes down to money. But we even have seen the Capitola Mall kind of come and go in our eyes. We remember when it was Round Bowl Ranch, and I mean, why couldn't housing be just completely recreated on that?
There's major discussion about that. That will happen.
It is gonna
It will
happen.
happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's been,
How can it happen faster?
Right, it's
That's great. We can't even support a commercial district right now. You have to be able to do that to be able to build that kind of house. It should be a combination of that. And certainly our corridor, Capitol Avenue, Road, all the way out has many sites that could be possibly go to hydrants on top of commercial buildings. The mixed use has worked at Santana Row. Perfect example. It works in commercial areas.
It works because it's a 1-to-5 ratio at most of commercial to residential. But our enlightened communities, like Scotts Valley, still has a 50% requirement. 50% has to be commercial.
Wow.
Look at around you and the vacancies. It makes no sense. Renters give zero underwriting value to the commercial in these mixed-use projects. It's insanity. It's insanity. The requirement that these decision makers will not move past. The county had it for years and stopped every mixed-use project. Now with Sustainable Santa Cruz, which is the new plan that they've approved, they've gotten away from that, but still there's a nonsensical requirement, in my opinion, for commercial development that envisions this endless corridor of commercial development instead of the nodes, like the, Scotts Valley wants to do its town center, but yet still insists on commercial development up and down Scotts Valley Drive. Capitola, has an opportunity to do a wonderful thing there on the Moai, but all these vacancies don't help that. You know what I mean? Up and down, and when you require more commercial, doesn't help that intensification where you want it. It weakens it. It waters it down. In my opinion.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Tom.
Yeah, and I guess this is more of a comment. I just want to follow up on what you were saying about Capitola Mall. It makes me wonder why not just do eminent domain, because they've had it since 2016. So they've had plenty of time to do something. They haven't done anything. The other thing is for commercial real estate, because the value is dropping for commercial real estate, it's causing a lot of regional banks to fail. And so, if we try to update our legislation and try to have commercial requirements or mixed use, I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be just easier to just seize it with eminent domain and just make affordable housing or make whatever we want? So
what government actor, this is just a question, what government actor do you think right now is well positioned? Because eminent domain, requires a government actor.
Yep.
What government actor has the cash, first of all, to buy a place like that at market rate, because we just don't have the revenues to do that, and then take it and redevelop it for the purposes for rural housing. We've used eminent domain twice in Santa Clara County in the last 20 years, and I will tell you both times have been very, very challenging.
Yeah.
I think a place like Capitola Mall, it really does need a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
We need to pass some kind of a bond, some kind of a revenue measure so we can build some housing there and couple it with a viable amount of retail development. We've got this crazy notion that still, and you know, like I said, I work for city, I get it. We've got this idea that if we build commercial, it's gonna create sales tax, and that sales tax is gonna help our cities function, and it's just not. We're just building empty built shells that are harder and harder to fill. So we've gotta rethink a very, very old value that we've had and kind of put it to the side now in this new market.
I think some of it is back to what you said about Prop 13, like if you're trying to run a city and you're looking at your budget, like what's gonna bring in money? Like housing versus commercial. I want commercial because it's gonna help fill my coffers. It's very short-sighted in my view.
Particularly if the commercial is vacant.
Exactly. You got too many people who can afford to live here to use commercial. Like, what's the right, you need a balance. And we do not have the right balance.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have time for just one more question. Yes.
Thank you. Some people on the panel might know me. I had 70 people by Safeway living in a big house, $1,500 a month rent. I want any of the panel, we won't get into tonight, but in Capitola, they talked about co-op housing. There were co-ops. I had people come way back in Santa Cruz. So I hope there'll be a conversation, at least I know one person I hope to speak to, Elaine. You know how long I've been at this. By the way, I'm 87. Anyone want to give me a ride after the meeting, I appreciate it. If we can make something happen, people that are here, think of what you could do to show up at United Way. That's coming up with the Latino Affairs Commission. They only meet every other month. And bring that passion that if we don't do anything with it, we can begin to do housing in kind of co-ops. I know we're not going to get into a discussion, but if you did work at City Hall in San Jose, Hank Rosendin, my mentor, 40 years public parks and rec. I just know that with respect, we have a mutual friend, and come Sunday, show up with Reverend Deborah, support someone that could really move forward what we can do here in Santa Cruz. That'll be at the Resource Center for Nonviolence. I hope we do some networking, and I am Richard Lewis, Bob and Jack Lewis, my family. I'm not rich. I had to walk to get here. But just know that if we all can work together, let's see what we can do with a revisit, because it's $250,000 for that 600-bed housing at Cabrillo for students. Think what we could do to build our houses, like that 70-person house I have. Whose house? Our house. Need some developers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd love to hear the creativity around housing solutions from you all tonight. Thank you for bringing your energy and your wonderful questions, and for sharing your evening with us tonight. Really appreciate it. And thank you again to our wonderful panelists. We'll give them one more round of applause.